So when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified, which just fits with their day. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." Why does Peter say this? Because he's a what? He's a disciple, and he wants to be like his what? So his first impulse is, Jesus does it, I'm going to do it. Thank you, sister. You see what's going on here? If the rabbi does it, then I'm going to do it. And there's some other things we could talk about what age Peter may have been in. By the way, if Bet Midrash was 14, 15, 16, that's when you were plying a trade, and several of the disciples were working with their father Zebedee, how old were the disciples? I mean, I've seen enough Easter pageants where it's 39-year-old men with lots of leg hair coming out from underneath their bathrobes. I mean, maybe, but Jesus seemed to operate in a particular culture, which just throws out. It's also interesting. Do I have time? Yeah, I have time. It's also interesting. Peter is the one we know of who had a mother-in-law, so that means he's married. And when Jesus discusses the temple tax, and the temple tax was required of a Jewish male 20 years or older. And so the only one that Jesus has the temple tax discussion with is Peter, which puts Peter at least 20. Secondly, many rabbis would have one Talmudim student who was older than the rest, kind of as somebody to do things first. You know what I mean? They would kind of have like a lead student who was a little bit older, who would generally be the one to try things first. And so Peter clearly fits this pattern of a rabbi who would call students who, high school boys changed the world? High school boys who were like the B team. To me, this has profound implications for what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Notice what happens. "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," Jesus said. And then Peter got out of the boat, walked on water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and he beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" Now, I was always taught and always assumed that when Jesus said, "you of little faith," he's saying, "Peter, you lost faith in who?" Is Jesus sinking? Who did Peter? That was a big who, wasn't it? Let me try that again. Jesus says, "you of little faith." Jesus isn't sinking. Peter loses faith that he can actually do it. I have heard a lot of teachings about how I am to have faith in Jesus. But apparently, Jesus has faith in me. Peter, I wouldn't have called you if I didn't think that you on the JV, couldn't be like me. To me, this has profound implications for what it means to be the presence of Jesus in my community, my neighborhood, those I work with, those who do not know Jesus, those who do not believe in the reality of a kingdom that will endure forever, that death has been conquered. Jesus apparently has great faith in his students. Does Jesus have faith in you? Turn with me over to John chapter 1. We'll finish by looking at one disciple in particular. And there are all sorts of things we could just go all night and talk about some other things. We could talk about the age of the disciple John, and some really compelling arguments for why I just won't get into that because you'll just not even believe me. But notice John chapter 1. John chapter 1, verse 43. And once again, texts like this to me just start to leap off the page when I begin to understand the world that Jesus lived in. The next day, John 1:43, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, Lech acharai, follow me. Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Let me show you a picture of Bethsaida. We'll just keep this picture up here for the rest of the time. Some people digging around in it. Bethsaida is a fishing village on the Sea of Galilee with 600 people, probably the time of Jesus, living in it. What's the small town around here that whenever you want to talk about living in the middle of nowhere in a small town, you mention it? What? Carver? Harvard? Is that what you said? Harvard? Is anybody here from Harvard? Want to meet with this lady afterwards? Harvard? What's your small town? Pardon? Quarter Horse Town. Okay. She's really embarrassed, I think, that you said that. But we'll get through that later, maybe. Podunk? You have a town called Podunk? I thought that was made up. Okay. Philip is from this tiny little fishing village. And Jesus says, come, follow me. In rabbinical history, you only have two evidences of rabbis who went and called students. A rabbi named Hillel, who lived roughly 50 years before Jesus. Hillel said, God can make a disciple out of anybody. And then you have Jesus, who went and called disciples. Jesus is one of two rabbis, at least that I've been able to find, who went and called disciples who weren't the best of the best. Philip is from this little town called Bethsaida. 600 people, fishing village. Church tradition, once again, now we're off the scriptural map. Church tradition has it that Philip later in his life ended up in a Greek city called Hierapolis. I was there a few weeks ago. A massive Greek city in what was called Asia Minor. It's present-day Turkey. Hierapolis was a center, a Roman garrison. So it was a center for Roman soldiers. They had all sorts of hot baths and cold baths. And because the soldiers were there, there was a massive cemetery for Roman soldiers who'd been decorated in battle. And there was a massive gambling center in Hierapolis. This massive, sophisticated, Hellenized by Alexander the Great in roughly the 300s, 200s before Common Era. This massive, sophisticated, marble, Greco-Roman city. Church tradition has it that Philip went to Hierapolis. At Hierapolis is a gate. It's called the Domitian Gate. And Domitian was the emperor at the time. And the Emperor Domitian believed that he was God. And so to buy and sell, you had to offer incense in Asia Minor. And you offered incense as a way of acknowledging Caesar is God. Then you could buy or sell. And to do that, you had to have a stain on your hand, which was called the mark. And the Jews referred to the Roman Emperor Domitian as the beast. So in order to buy and sell, you had to have the mark of the beast. Just wax with your vision of Revelation, by the way. Domitian had a gate in Hierapolis. And to enter the city, you had to walk through the Domitian Gate. And as you walked under the Domitian Gate, what you were saying, in a physical, symbolic kind of way, is you were saying, I'm acknowledging Domitian is God. If you refused to walk through the gate, you were crucified outside the gate.